Alright, so this is going to be a quick video on how to set up the 09 to 13 ZX6. I'm going to go over some of the differences real quick on the 09 to 12 and the 13. There's not many of them. Some of them are not really a big deal. Hopefully I'll hit all the subjects that everyone needs to set these up. If you have any questions, you can just hit me up. You guys know where to find me, hopefully. And I'll answer any questions that I can. Alright, so this is my 2013 ZX6. Let's start at the back end real quick. One of the minor differences, if you look here on my 09 ZX6, the rear fairing comes down right above the subcage mount, whereas on my 2013 the rear fairing comes just below the mount. So depending on what subcage you use, you're gonna have to notch out a little piece of that fairing. Alright, so let's go to the front of the bike. The forks on the 09 to 12 are a 51 millimeter. On 2013 ZX6s, they went back down to the 50 millimeter. Also, the upper fairing stay on the 09 to 12s are just a tiny bit different than the 2013. They look the same, but the mounting holes for the 13 are off just a tiny bit, enough to not make it work. The windscreen is still the same though, so you can reuse the windscreen. Also, the front rotors on the bikes are a little different. From 2009 to 2012 they were 300 millimeters. 2013 they upped them to 310 millimeters. Lastly, the 2009 to 2012 did not have traction control, whereas the 2013 has what they call KTRC, or Kawasaki traction control. So I'll go over that later on how to bypass that. So let's get into the bike, starting with the tip over sensor. Okay, so this is the tip over sensor. It's actually located under the stock seat, right behind the trunk. All you need to do is take that out, disconnect it. You're gonna pry that little box apart. Inside there's a little wheel. Pull that stuff out, put it back together, and you're done. That's it. Okay, so let's get into the clean air bypass real quick. There's a couple different things you can do. I'm just gonna go over real quick what I've done on my bike, and then I'll go over real quick the other option. So first off, you're going to need to take off the seat and the gas tank. Then you're left with this. So you're going to need a 3mm Allen wrench to loosen up the air box from the throttle bodies. On both sides you'll see this little hole right here. Straight in through there you'll see where the bolt is that you'll need to loosen on both sides. So loosen that up. Then on front here there's a 10mm bolt. You're going to need to loosen that. Also on the back side of the airbox there's various hoses attached to it. That's the smog. You can disconnect that or you can leave them, whatever. The main hose you're going to need to disconnect is the hose from the crankcase to the airbox, and that you're going to have to plug up. Yeah, get a plug for that and plug it up. I myself took off pretty much all the smog that was on my bike, with the exception of the catalytic converter. There's hoses running from the throttle body throughout the bike. You're gonna have to trace those to figure out which ones are smog. But whatever hoses you actually remove, make sure you plug those up on the throttle body. There was like 4 or 5 that I can think of right now that I had to remove. Yeah, make sure you plug those up or you'll have vacuum leaks, which will create problems for you down the line. So this is where the main hose that we're going to be disconnecting from the air box is mounted to, right here. This is the crankcase. So after we remove that, you can basically remove the air box. So you're going to need to get a hose the same size and about triple the length. And basically what you're going to do is you're going to run it from the crankcase around to the side of the motor and then to the front, and you can connect it to this valve right here. This valve actually gets vacuum from the exhaust, so any oil that actually gets into that line will actually go into the exhaust and burn off. You're also going to need to unplug this connector from the valve, and then you're going to have to jump it. from one side to the other. I just used a small piece of wire and connected it. Then black taped over that, wrapped it up real good, and then put it off to the side so you don't throw any codes on the ECU. Now the other option besides this is you can remove that valve and the plates it's connected to, and you can purchase smog block off plates, mount those, and then instead of running a hose from the crankcase to the front, you'll just run a hose from the crankcase to a small breather. Some of the guys have used that and are completely happy with that. So do your research, and whatever option you want, both work. So let's go over the traction control really quick for all you 2013 guys. This is the connector for the KTRC, the Kawasaki traction control. Basically what you're going to need to do until you get your ECU programmed, if you're going to get your ECU programmed, is you're going to need to hook up a toggle switch, which you can see right here. And basically you're going to run that switch between the black wire with the blue stripe and the yellow wire. And basically every time you flip that switch, it'll toggle through the different modes of traction control. 1, 2, 3, and then off, which is what we want. The other option later on is to get the ECU programmed. I'll have a link to where you can get this done. And basically when he programs it, a few things happen. He can program it so that the ECU has memory when it comes to the traction control. So when you turn off the bike and back on, if it was off before, it'll stay off instead of defaulting to traction control 1. He also is able to eliminate the exhaust servo control so that when you disconnect that, you don't throw any codes. You can get rid of that, save a little room in the trunk. Also, he gives you a little bit more power and smooths out the idle a bit. I'll have the links for that at the end of the video. So now that you have a toggle switch for your traction control, you can actually remove, or you can leave them there, it's up to you, the sensors that are on the front and rear rotors. So while the airbox is off, now's a good time to run and fix any hose, cable, or wiring issues that you have to do. The only real thing I did was run the wiring for the switches for my traction control and my fans. I'm running a dual fan setup, which I highly recommend because the ZX6s are known for overheating. Neil at Dick's Customs can reinforce your radiator as well as add additional tabs for an extra fan if you want. If you don't want the extra fan, I would suggest going to muzzy.com and checking out their 6-blade aluminum fans. Those will actually almost double the airflow of the stock fan and help keep the bike cool. Okay, so moving on to the subframe, it definitely needs to be reinforced, and you'll need to have some reinforcement under the rear fairing too. Just like this. I would suggest drilling a small hole through the fairings into one of these supports, which will increase the strength by preventing the fairings from moving around on the actual support when you're stepping on the fairings. Neil at Dick's Customs can also do this for you. He does some really good work. The other option, Stunner X makes a steel subframe. This is the gas tank on my 13. 09 to 13, the gas tanks are the same. And it's a little tricky to dent the stock tank because of the way it's shaped on top. That's why I opted to have Neil at Dick's Customs fabricate it for me. He even reinforces the inside of the tank to make sure it doesn't cave in when you're jumping around on it like we do. Especially for all you guys who like to do acid drops. My seats are done by HT Moto. The ones on my 13 I've had for over a year. They're perfect. On my 09 I had those for over 2 years, no problems. Another option, you can hit up JB Seats, they do good work as well. So now on to the rear brake setup. There's a lot of options when it comes to that. Let's just start with mine. I'm running a full throttle setup with 2 radial 4-piston Behringers. And then there's also an option on the bottom to use a 2-piston Brembo right here. The Behringers are a little expensive, but they have a ton of power. I actually had to downgrade to the street pads because the pads it came with, which are race pads, had too much braking power. This is Leah's bike. She's running a Hohei setup with 2 Nissan 4-pistons. And then this is Carbajal's bike. He's running a Hohei setup as well with a 4-piston Nissan and a 2-piston Brembo. This is probably the most popular of the setups. This is Britton's bike. He's running a Brembo radial 4-piston and a 2-piston Brembo with an NDC bracket. Now this is the bracket I'd most suggest for the 09 to 13 due to this piece right here. It provides extra support for the brake bracket tab inside the subframe. This is actually broken off on a couple people's bikes I've known due to the extra brake power that we're using. Alright, so next up is the exhaust. I'm currently using a Two Brothers exhaust. It sounds good, but unfortunately I'm not exactly happy with it. I had to actually cut down the connecting tube to bring in the exhaust just a little bit because it would stick out too much and scrape pretty hard on the floor when I would be drifting. Also, the way it attaches, it moves around a little bit, which I don't like. The exhaust I would actually suggest is this one. It's the Graves exhaust. The main reason, it tucks really nice, and it actually, the way it attaches, it bolts directly to where the stock exhaust bolted on, so it's a much more solid mount, and so the pipe doesn't move around a lot like on my Two Brothers. Another option which I liked here on Leah's bike is the Stunner X pipe. It tucks in nicely and mounts pretty solid. A little bit of play to it, but not as bad as my Two Brothers. So this is my cage and sub cage. I'm running the Impact Tech. I've been running them for around 4 years now and have not had any issues with them. Your other choices, this is the Freestyle Ingenuity setup on Britton's bike, and this is the Stunner X setup on Leah's bike. Alright, so up top I have the Apex Manufacturing 3-inch riser clip-ons. They also make them in a 4-inch. I have the RSC clutch lever and the Behringer handbrake. And you can see right here, this is the upper fairing stay and windscreen support that Neil over at Dick's Customs made. Okay, so on this bike you see that he's running converter bars, Brembo Master, and the RSC clutch lever. All this stuff, the last stuff I've been going over, is pretty much all that's preference. I'm just going over what I know works and what has worked out for some of the other guys I've ridden with, but that stuff's up to you. You can do your research and figure out what's better for you and what you like. So that's pretty much it that I can think of right now. The first half of the video is the main part with the stuff that pertains to the 09 to 13. The rest, like I said, is all preference stuff. So hopefully this helps you. If there's any other questions, just hit me up. You know where to find me. And that should be it for now. I'll be working on a legit video later, but this video I wanted to get out as quick as possible to help you guys out. So hopefully it helps. Alright guys.